Coming up, going digital in your engine compartment, it could make things run a whole lot better.
A different approach to simulation and aviation training, making old big iron new again.
And Icon is about to tick off Donald Trump. AOPA Live this week is next.
Experience the thrill from closer than ever before when the Ultimate Motorsports Series takes to the sky. The Red Bull Air Race World Championship is coming to Indianapolis Motor Speedway October 1st and 2nd. Tickets now on sale.
So many crashes. In just 8 years, more than 3,000 lives lost.
Airplanes are falling out of the sky? That's the impression you would have gotten if you were watching NBC News Wednesday night. Hello, I'm Melissa Rudinger.
And I'm Tom Haynes. NBC's transportation reporter Tom Costello did a number on general aviation. Everything he said was true, but the selective presentation of accident stats painted a picture much bleaker than truth.
The NTSB reports an average of 250 general aviation planes crash every year, nearly 5 a week. And 417 people are killed, more than 1 a day.
And that's almost true. The actual number of fatal accidents was 219 last year, but it ignores the larger truth.
Well, the GA safety record, if you look at it over the long term, has improved significantly. In fact, in the past 30 years, general aviation accidents, fatals, and mid-airs are all down across the board.
And while the NTSB continues to focus on general aviation, it spends less effort on areas that affect more people.
General aviation is incredibly safe with very low numbers of fatalities. So if the NTSB were to shift their focus to another area within the transportation realm with significantly higher numbers of accidents and fatalities, they might see a better overall benefit.
And more than any other industry, general aviation is driven to improve safety.
So in addition to the normal Air Safety Institute safety products, we're also working closely with FAA to unblock the TSB information so everybody has traffic information right there in the cockpit. We're also looking at expanding proficiency centers like you see at Oshkosh and taking that program out to a wider audience.
AOPA President Mark Baker talked to the NBC reporter after his story aired. Mr. Costello defended his reporting, but also said he would use AOPA and the Air Safety Institute as a resource in the future.
And the NTSB says the FAA needs to do a better job on training air traffic controllers on how to handle light aircraft emergencies. The safety agency looked at a series of accidents where controllers vectored aircraft in distress into instrument conditions. In some cases, while the pilot said he was no gyro or had lost his AHRS, the controller didn't understand that that meant the pilot needed to get to visual conditions immediately or stay there. The NTSB recommended that controllers get simulation-based training to be able to better identify the problem and help the pilot. But the pilot can help too. In many of the accidents, the pilot didn't tell ATC exactly what he needed, like, I want vectors to the nearest VMC airport. You'll find some resources on emergency communications on the AOPA Air Safety Institute's website.
We've been telling you for some time now that there could be ways to upgrade our legacy aircraft at significantly reduced cost. And that's to use equipment that's not certificated necessarily, but has already been torture tested in experimental aircraft. This week, Warren Morningstar takes a look at replacing the most antiquated part on your engine.
Very, very different, very nice.
Dave Hirschman is always trying things to squeeze more performance, safety, and utility out of his RV3. And because the RV is an experimental, he can do things you can't do yet with a Cessna or Piper. But he thinks you should be able to.
Magnetos used to exist in cars, and they don't exist in cars anymore for some really good reasons. Airplanes have even more compelling reasons to use electronic ignitions because they fly at high and low altitudes.
It's all about timing.
Well, the Magneto is pretty old technology. It's a fixed timing point, which means it's a compromise between takeoff power, where the ignition timing is retarded to a point where there's no detonation, and advanced enough, I should say, to give efficiency during cruise flight.
Now, compromise is a dirty word nowadays, but electronic ignition gives you the best of all worlds. And Dave is going modern with electronics from Emag out of Texas.
From a pilot's perspective, what I expect to gain from this is easier starts, better lean and peak operation, more range, and less fuel flow.
But as they say, there is no free lunch, but in this case, the costs are pretty low.
It would be if you have a totally flat battery somewhere out in the field and you need to get home and you need to hand prop it. The Emag will not support that.
But each Emag has its own internal alternator, so it will work without battery power as long as the engine is turning more than 900 RPM. And it's more reliable than a Magneto.
And the Magneto has plastic gears in it. And they're just known to become embrittled over time.
The Emag has only one moving part, and it easily fits in the same space as the old Magneto. And there's another benefit.
I always get a great amount of joy when I go out and buy these replacement automotive plugs.
An aviation spark plug costs $45. The automotive plug, just $250.
And they're better because the automotive plugs provide a bigger, longer lasting spark that burns the fuel more thoroughly and cleanly.
So why are we still limping along on antique mags? Well, because for the moment, the FAA won't let us use all electronic ignition. Warren Morningstar, AOPA Live.
So Tom, I understand there's at least one certified electronic ignition system out there.
Yeah, there are ways to do this, maybe not as complete as what Dave's doing with replacing both mags, but there is a system called Electro Air, which is actually on our sweepstakes 172 that we'll be giving away next year. And what that does is replaces one mag that fires the top cylinders, the spark plugs on the top cylinders, and the traditional mag stays on the airplane, fires the bottom one. And it gives you about 80% or so of the efficiency you'd get with a dual mag system and keeps the FAA happy. And so we are making progress, in this way of getting some of the good stuff that we see in the experimental market, finally finding its way over to be useful to us in our certified airplanes. Another example of that was what we saw earlier this summer with Garmin introducing the G5, the electronic attitude indicator, to replace your mechanical, cantankerous and unreliable mechanical gyros that we all fly around with. And so that's a solution too, coming out of the experimental world, finding its way into a certified airplane. So we are seeing progress.
Yes, we are. I think with Part 23 reform and now this retrofit reform, we are definitely getting traction finally.
Right, and there's a number of paths. NORSI, we've talked about that, non-enhanced or non-required safety reporting equipment, and that sort of thing is another way that we can start to see some of this new gear find its way to GA airplanes. So anyhow, it's kind of exciting times.
Good news story.
And meanwhile, the FAA has just published proposed regulations and procedures for Mitsubishi MU2 pilots. The speedy turboprop is known for its unique handling characteristics. That's because it uses spoilers instead of ailerons. You can read more about the proposed rule on our website. And Melissa, I've flown the MU2 some, and I can tell you it is an unusually handling airplane, but boy, is it fast.
Yeah, I've never flown one, but I know the folks that own them are really think they're fantastic
They
airplanes.
are, and if the pilots follow these guidelines and stay proficient, it can be a really good airplane.
Great. Don't tell Donald Trump, but Icon is exporting jobs to Mexico. Icon will open a composite parts facility in Tijuana next year. A Mexican newspaper was first to report the news, and Icon later confirmed it to AOPA. Icon founder Kirk Hawkins said he is going to Mexico to reduce costs and bring parts suppliers under direct control. The plant will employ 1,000 workers. The composite parts will be shipped back to Vacaville, California for final assembly.
So Melissa, this new agreement that Icon has with the company in Mexico is a replacement actually for a deal they had with Cirrus aircraft a couple of years ago, where they were manufacturing subassemblies for Icon at the Grand Forks plant for Cirrus. Of course, they're based in Duluth, Minnesota, and you got Grand Forks. I can't think of how you could get much further away from Mexico, geographically at least, and perhaps culturally as well, than those two places.
It's quite a contrast.
It is quite a contrast.
And about 400 nautical miles southeast of Duluth lies Battle Creek, Michigan, and that's where you'll find our next AOPA Fly-In on September 16th and 17th. Kilo Golf Romeo Romeo has no shortage of general aviation sites. Last week we showed you the small side of GA with a look at the Waco Classic factory, which you can tour if you go to the fly-in. This week we're showing you the big side where large biz jets go for complete overhauls. AOPA Live's Josh Cochran has the story.
Duncan Aviation has been around for decades, and they have grown into the largest family-owned maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility in the world.
It's exactly like a hospital for business jets, because you go to a place like this because of all the capabilities we have and all the expertise we have, and because you want to get back on your feet again, and they want these airplanes out flying.
Duncan does just about everything a business jet could need. The work is highly customized and labor-intensive. The paint shop is just one example. First, the paint is chemically stripped and sanded down. After all the old paint is gone, a primer and base coat are applied. Then, finally, the custom paint job can start. Duncan has painted some pretty unique schemes.
You know, an aircraft like this to paint probably is in the vicinity of about 1,000 man-hours to do. We have some of those that may take 3,000 or 4,000 hours, so it's a lot of work, and it's very labor-intensive, and obviously it's very pretty at the end, and that's what everybody's after.
Interiors are also labor-intensive. Seats are built for each customer and can take 400 to 500 hours just to design.
Our craftspeople here are very good at doing this type of work, and it's all one of a kind, all from the special stitching on the sides to the designs that we put on those seats.
Every other part of the interior is customized from cabinets to dishware.
Very similar to refurbishing the inside of a house, because you're going to be looking at colors of fabrics and different types of veneers and finishes and things. As you see here, all the choices.
After all the intricate work on the parts, the airplane comes back together in the main hangar at Duncan.
And there usually is a flurry of activity at the end. All the airplane is reassembled, and we're getting ready to deliver it back to a happy customer, and they're going to be thrilled with it for a lot of years, and we hope to have them come back and see us again.
Visitors to the Battle Creek Fly-In will get to tour Duncan and see these jets undergo their transformation. Josh Cochran, AOPA Live.
And you can sign up to take the tour of Duncan at our fly-in website. Click on the Things to Do Battle Creek tab. While at the fly-in, you will also get to see an aerobatic demonstration by Embry-Riddle's Matt Chapman. Chapman will be showing off his skill in an extra 330 LX on Saturday afternoon, so it looks like it's shaping up to be a really fun event.
It does, and if you've seen a business jet out there somewhere with a really funky paint job on it, probably it's from Duncan. They are really creative folks. And meanwhile, if you're on your way to Battle Creek, one place you might want to check out en route one way or the other is Mackinac Island in Lake Michigan. Airplanes are the only motorized vehicles allowed on the picturesque and tranquil island, and the airport is only about a mile from town. You can hitch a ride from the airport into town on a horse-drawn carriage. It's a lot of fun. You can read more about it in the destinations section of our websites. I've done it, flown the Bonanza out there, and Mackinac is really fun. A lot of history there.
Sounds like a fun time.
It is. Well, coming up after the break, remembering 9/11.
And learning to do things you'd never try in an airplane.
If you love the content from AOPA's publications, there's a new way to learn more about it. Hangar Talk is a podcast that takes you behind the stories we cover. This week, Ian Twombly and David Toulis take you back 15 years. When the terror attacks on September 11th, 2001 happened, AOPA immediately got to work to protect and restore our rights to fly. Point person on all that effort was none other than our own Melissa. Hangar Talk caught up with her this week to talk about that dark and challenging time and her role in turning it around.
What we did the first few days, because VFR was grounded, I think, VFR was grounded actually for quite a long time if you took
yes, it was.
in Class B.
Yeah.
But IFR was restored in a few days, at least limited IFR. But in the meantime, what we did with our we were getting calls through a hotline. We had our war room in Frederick. We were batching these, I'll call it batching, these calls. I've got a guy in Oklahoma or Seattle, wherever that's stuck, they need to go from A to B. I would take those lists would be sent to me, and I would take them into the war room, and we would process them as waivers. We got a process going pretty quickly where we could get one-time waivers to get somebody home in a window of time. And again, without researching it, I don't remember the exact specifics, but we basically got a waiver process going to allow folks that came in through our hotline to get their waiver and get back to their home base.
So you can find more about the podcast on iTunes or Google Play. And Melissa, that was a fascinating time. We were actually in the same conference room, learned about it at the same time, and then really both went kind of different directions. You down to the FAA, I was involved on the media side as we tried to kind of help be impactful and educating the media about what general aviation is, and also working with government, and you were embedded down at the FAA for weeks.
Yeah, I know. We were actually standing and watching the same television when the second airplane hit, and the original report was it was a small aircraft, and so, but we knew, obviously, like the rest of the nation, that it was an attack, and yeah, I quickly was redeployed down to DC to their war room, and we really did a good job of not only getting folks home, but then working really for the next 3 years, almost full time, to restore access to what we call the new normal today.
Yeah, boy, it's been amazing time and an incredible impact that it's had on general aviation. Well, and now turning to a subject we've reported on before, Elaine Harmon was finally laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery. She served as a Wasp during World War II and died last year. Her family fought for months to restore the right for Wasps to be able to have their ashes interred at Arlington. Wednesday morning, Elaine's ashes were placed there. Rest in peace.
A legendary military airplane is retiring after 60 years of service. One of the few remaining F-4 Phantoms made its last unmanned flight over the desert of California. Since the late 90s, unmanned F-4 Phantoms have been used as targets for new weapons systems, and many have been shot down. The airplane on the last flight was not shot down, but it's being retired as F-16s are taking over the role as aerial targets. The F-4 will be retired altogether by the end of this year.
And speaking of unmanned aircraft, AOPA has been selected to serve on the new RTCA Drone Advisory Committee. The committee will give recommendations on how to safely introduce unmanned systems into airspace above 400 feet, where most of us fly. The committee includes folks from the media, airports, pilot unions, Google and Facebook, and other commercial and academic operators. So Melissa, you're involved in this committee. What really is going to happen there? What's it about?
So this is the next step. We've got the small UAS rule in place and going, and so now we need to migrate to the larger UAS in airspace above 400 feet, as we've talked about. And this drone committee, which has its kickoff meeting next Friday, is one that I'll be staffing, and actually Mark Baker will be involved as well.
Mm-hmm. So what should we make out of the idea that we got companies like Google and Facebook, ones that we don't traditionally see playing in aviation, all of a sudden being on this committee and having real interest here? It's
a whole new day in aviation for sure, and those companies have a stake in the game like they've never had in manned aviation. And so they're in some leadership roles in terms of getting this technology moved forward and getting these drones integrated. So they're very important players. Right, and they're more interested, as it seems like, in the autonomous use of drones, right, as opposed to being a line of sight. It would appear so. Certainly their business model would not support having individual drone operators for every delivery drone. So autonomous, multiple drones flying predetermined flight paths, I think, is really their long-term vision. Okay, well, I'm sure you'll keep us posted on how all that unfolds. And finally, imagine taking a student pilot and presenting them with a very dangerous scenario. Maybe not the best way to run a flight school, but AOPA Live's Paul Harrop found a simulator company and flight school where the instructors can really push students to be ready for anything.
Get ready to turn left, that's downwind, all right? So look left, clear left, turn left.
This is not an old school flight lesson. This one is thoroughly modern.
We're going to turn about to heading to north, okay?
Modern Pilot Flight School near Seattle teaches people in approved flight training devices built by their sister company 1G Simulations.
This is a tool, and if you know how to use the tool, you should use the tool to help your clients.
Meg Godlewski is a pro. She's a master instructor and quickly approaching 4,000 hours of dual instruction given.
Don't let the witch pitch, be the master of the witch.
For Meg, the sim is a great tool for demonstrating dangers pilots might face in the real world.
Crosswind landings are a big one. I'll crank the thing up and do crosswind landings I would never take a client into, just so they can see how the aircraft is going to react to some extent.
It's also a good tool for things like loss of thrust on takeoff and VFR into IMC scenarios.
All the things that I don't want them to do in the real world, I run them through it in the simulation technology.
1G's leaders hope that the technology can help lower the cost of flight training and make it safer.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for pilots to save money throughout their training by utilizing flight simulation. There's certainly a lot of opportunity to produce and replicate scenarios that you would never do in the real airplane in a simulation.
Paul Harrop, AOPA Live.
1G offers flight schools a unique deal. The company will provide the sim for free and only charge an hourly fee when it gets used. Find out more on their websites. Too bad we don't have stuff like that when I was learning to fly. That looks pretty amazing and very helpful.
A lot of fun, too.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. Thanks for joining us.
And we'll see you next Thursday.